Hello everyone, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to elders past and present. Welcome to the first video of the Week 2 lecture content. This first video captures some key definitions and some new concepts for your glossary of terms, which is essential for your understanding and progression in this unit. So let's begin. We begin with a revision of our working definition of health, which, as provided on screen, is that of the World Health Organization. So health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So here again, we see this holistic, idealistic, and strength-based definition of health. I'd like to get you to take a moment to check your understanding of this definition of health by practicing this question. I guess you could see it as a practice quiz question if you like. True or false? Health is the absence of disease. I'll give you a minute to think about that. Okay, let's progress. If you have any questions about that particular example, feel free to get in touch. The next definition that we require you to be across is a definition of the concept of disease. And this is one again for your glossary, another key term that we assume you have an understanding of. So the definition afforded on screen is disease, a disorder of the structure or function of an organ, part or system of the body, especially one that produces specific symptoms or that affects a specific location and is not simply a direct result of physical injury. Disease can result from the effects of genetic or developmental errors, infection, poisons, nutritional deficiency or imbalance, toxicity, or unfavorable environmental factors and illness. So there are multiple determinants or perhaps sources of disease that are captured in that definition there. Disease, what is considered a disease, what is considered illness, is highly context dependent. So there are 2 points on screen that I'd like us to spend some time reflecting upon. Things to know about health. Firstly, notions of health are context dependent. A person's belief that they are ill or not can depend on such things as their class, gender, ethnic group, or age. So if we take gender as an example, there's a body of research that suggests that women have a heightened sense of awareness and concern about health, compromising circumstances, and are more likely to seek healthcare than men. In Australia's National Health Survey, which happens, I think, every 2 years, it's common for women to report more diagnosed long-term health conditions. They're more likely to report psychological distress, they're more likely to see a GP, and they're more likely to be hospitalised. Analysis of the gendered experiences of illness have often been summarised using the cliche, women get sick, men die. A second feature about health that's a good one to reflect upon is that what classes as disease also changes throughout history. This can be due to increased expectations on health, advanced diagnostic ability, and social and economic reasons. So let's provide a few examples of this effect. One example is osteoporosis, which was once considered a largely unavoidable side effect of aging, but is now accepted as pathology. A second example is homosexuality. Homosexuality was once considered a psychiatric disorder. Indeed, it was considered that up until 1973, despite the lack of scientific evidence of pathology. It's no longer medically defined as a disorder. This is an example of how cultural beliefs, social practices, and social institutions shape or construct the ways in which health and illness are understood. Put another way, notions of health and illness are not necessarily objective facts, but can be social constructions that reflect the cultural, political, and morality of a particular society at a given point in time. A contemporary example, one that's close to my heart and my research, is the pathologization of gender diversity or transgender identification. With gender dysphoria, which was formerly termed gender identity disorder, and transsexualism in earlier iterations of the DSM. Basically what I'm getting at here is that gender diversity is pathologized, and that's a contemporary example of disease or illness. Okay, in this next section, we're going to reflect on a distinction that's often used in discussion of illness or disease, and that is the difference between acute illness and chronic illness. So again, this first lecture is quite definition heavy. So there are a few concepts that we just need you to simply have an understanding of and be able to speak to, for instance, in a quiz or in an exam. Okay, so the features of acute illness. So features of acute illness are it begins quickly, it typically lasts for a short duration, so less than 6 months, and there's an expectation of returning to normal health. This is in contrast to what we understand as chronic disease or chronic illness, which usually develops slowly, lasts a long time, often progressive and incurable. Most will have no cure, and there are long-term effects which are difficult to predict. Some examples of chronic disease include cardiovascular disease, diabetes, depression, arthritis, and dementia. So we've just very briefly spoken to the distinction between acute and chronic illness. I'd just like to ask you a few questions to test your knowledge. Would you say that COVID-19 is an acute or a chronic illness? Get you to jot down your answer there. We will discuss this in our next class. And a second question, is gastroenteritis an acute or chronic illness? So gastroenteritis is often a condition related to perhaps something that you've eaten. So having gastro or an upset stomach. Okay, progressing on to the final task for this first lecture of week 2. I'd like you to spend some time reflecting on the health issue that you've chosen to reflect upon for your evidence summary. So just to clarify, the evidence summary is the first written piece of assessment for this unit, and it's due toward the end of July. I want you to answer the questions on screen. So they are, what are the key features of your health condition? How is the health condition contracted or initiated? How long does it last? What is the treatment if there is a treatment? Is it an acute illness or a chronic illness? There will be a discussion post closer to the start of week 2 where you can post your answers. So I'll get you to post your answers on the relevant discussion board. This concludes the first lecture for the week 2 content. Stay tuned for the following lecture.